And hello, I'm Rick Dancer. Welcome to Get Real with Rick Dancer, where we get real. I was a news anchor for 30 years, and I've been in the media business for probably 40. And I think sometimes just having conversations is really what people need to do. And not being afraid to bring up things that people don't want to talk about and all that kind of stuff, because we can't live that way. I mean, it just doesn't work. We've seen what happens when you try to stifle conversation, when you trample on people's freedoms. And if we don't have these conversations, and I know sometimes tonight we're going to talk about, on this episode, we're going to talk about some stuff going on in the county that I live in Broadwater County, Montana. Some stuff's been going on, and the woman you're going to meet here is taking them to court. And we're going to talk about that. And our sponsors are Montana Oral Surgery and Implant Center out of Helena, Montana, where they believe that we should have all kinds of conversations, good, bad, and ugly. Also, our sponsors, Fairway Independent Mortgage, Greg Hinkle. In fact, I have a little message from him. If you're looking to move out of Oregon, Washington, Montana, there's all these little rules that go along. You know how our representatives are. They come up with all kinds of things to make it more difficult that you don't know about. Well, Greg can walk you through that process. That's what he's there for, right there in Montana. He's from Oregon and Washington, so he understands all three. He's a really great guy to deal with. Our other sponsors, we're going to hear a little bit more from them a little bit later, but let's bring on our guest. Audrey Martin, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. So Audrey I'm going to have you kind of tell people why they should listen to you by giving us your cred. But she comes into the office where I am, and we had this long conversation the other day, and I'm going to put me over here because then it looks more like I'm looking at you when I look at my camera, the angle. And you're taking the county to court, but we have other things we want to talk about. And I think for my Oregon viewers, this will be very interesting, because I think you're going to see some similarities in things that go on in your state. And hopefully what we learn from all of this is that we are the people. So the government works for us. They wouldn't be here if it weren't for us. And we have got that. Don't you think, Audrey, that we have that so screwed up where we think that the government, that they're our boss. They tell us what to do, when in fact, we should be telling them what to do.
Absolutely. And our Constitution in both our beautiful country and in our own state says that. And so, I mean, that's definitely a power that the people need to take back for themselves.
I always say, when I ran for office in Oregon, I used to say, does it say we the legislature? No. Does it say we the senators? No. Does it say we the president? No. It starts off with we the people. And yet we the people never use our voice. So tell people a little of your history so they understand, that you actually know what you're talking about.
Yeah. So I'm a Montana girl. I cut my teeth in activism watching my mom and my dad lobby to keep the timber industry in Western Montana, where I grew up and I'm from, but also working with people in Idaho and Washington and Oregon in the late 90s, watching that with the Great Northwest Log Haul, kind of all of that, really, prominent timber kind of stuff. And I always tell people that was the best and worst successes that I ever saw in my career. And so hopefully we can take a lot of lessons learned from that and kind of move forward. I'm kind of the anomaly. I was a first generation college student. My dad was a military guy. My mom was very poorly educated, but still was really passionate about her community and her home. She came from a split family where she had a Native American background as well as Caucasian parents. So kind of grew up with that social dynamic and that social justice dynamic. So it was a really interesting household to grow up in, because I literally had kind of the best of all the worlds of those kinds of things. And so it was interesting. Fell and kind of got into communications and went and got a bachelor's degree in communications, and really I was always a social studies freak. So I was always the girl in school. I was always the girl in school that, like, if you couldn't do really well in government or you weren't really good in social studies, go sit next to Audrey. Like, she had all the answers. And I always always ask the tough questions. I remember being a senior in high school and my government teacher said, Audrey, why don't you just run for government? Why don't you just run for office if you want to argue? And I'm like, well, I don't want to argue. I just want an interpretation. And so, life happens and, well, how come you don't want to be a lawyer? And I always tell people, I am not a lawyer. I'm a citizen's advocate. And the reason for that being is a couple of reasons. Number one, lawyers are pretty constricted into the little box they're allowed to play in. Like you can only do certain things. As a citizen advocate, I can go out, I can use all sorts of research materials, I can do all that kind of stuff. So I got really involved in that kind of stuff, kind of growing up and watching it. I paid for college by fighting wildland fire, which is not uncommon for a lot of kids in, the Pacific Northwest.
That is so awesome.
We fight fire, and I still fight fire, just in a little bit different context. And I no longer work for a state and federal agency to do that. But so I always tell people in the summertime, I would fight fire. And in the wintertime, I really kind of honed my skills and got involved in politics. And so I did everything from doing a internship at the United Nations in New York City, and a Montana girl living 5 blocks off of Times Square and 5 blocks off of Central Park. It was super cool in my 20s to live there.
Did you think those police with the horses, like, oh my God, wait, there's a little bit of Montana here?
It was ironic because they had a station kind of down outside of where my apartment was, and I was always go down and be like, horses. I felt like I was a little bit still in touch with my Western heritage, but yeah. And then, I worked in the legislature in nonpartisan positions, got involved in campaigns as I got older. And I really realized that, when we talk about we the people elect those people. Yeah. And it seems like somewhere between the voting box and election night, we kind of lose track of that. Like we elect these people and we're like, oh, we elected them and we read their we read their mail, we read their whatever, but we really don't stay in contact with them. And I saw it on so many levels, dealing with the Veterans Administration, with my own father and military issues, timber industry, education. I have children, it was one of those things of I'm like, we really just need to do something. And so I just kind of dove into that. Like, it's kind of my thing is that I'm like, I want to make sense of this kind of stuff. And I feel like we need a voice, and everybody, I think, really struggles with what does that look like or how do I get involved? And I think there's obstacles in the way for people to get involved or voice their opinions for a reason. Because
wait. So what do you go? Okay. So what are you saying?
What I'm saying is I think that people aren't involved in having their voices heard in legislative committees, in local politics or affairs for numerous reasons. And one of them being is those elected officials and those bodies put up barriers to people having access to their government or their elected officials.
I totally agree with you. And they make it complicated, so complicated that it can't be easily explained. And then they look at you like you're the dummy. And,
right. Absolutely.
And you and I don't mind. I don't think there's such a thing as we could be brother and sister. I don't think there's such a bad thing as I was listening to Jordan Peterson this morning. He said, there are no bad questions. He says, in fact, when you're sitting in a room and you're in a group of people and you think of a question and you think, the reason you want to ask it is because you don't understand. And he says that makes you feel like you're going to look stupid. But 9 times out of 10, you ask the question that everybody else in the room is thinking the same thing, and you end up looking like the hero. If more people would look at it that way, sitting in a county commissioners meeting, sitting in a budget committee meeting and thinking, whoa, wait a minute, and say, I want you to go back and explain that. And then when they say, well, we'll have to sit down with you at another time. No. This is a public meeting. You explain why the garbage service is going up again after it already went up, and make them explain to you, and where's that money going? But we're afraid to do that because we don't want to look stupid.
I agree. I think we don't want to look stupid. And I also think that many times the people that we're asking the questions to don't want to have to answer the question, or don't even have the answer themselves. And it's just status quo. And they don't want to appear like, well, I'm just doing what we've always done here since 19 whatever. And so I think it's a double-edged sword on both sides. And so that's kind of one of the things that I really think is, if I could encourage listeners to do, is go out and ask those questions, learn how that works, and get the confidence in yourself to go out and ask those tough questions. And that's what I've done pretty much for the last 25 years of my life, is I've went out and asked those questions. Communication is the basis of any sort of, civil and just society. So we need to ask those questions.
And I think it's dangerous right now because of what we've been through over the last 3 years. We were told, don't ask, just go do. and those of us who ask really got canceled and or shunned and or spit on. And I think that's still happening. I mean, I think the most for people, especially here in Montana, for those in Oregon, what has just happened is, and you can explain more, our tax rates in Montana just skyrocketed. Some people's quadrupled. Mine went up 53% on my taxes, and it's really hard to get an explanation as to why that happened. And then what's really kind of irritating to me is the Democrats asked the legislature to meet and try to do something about this because property values have gone up so quickly, and the Republicans and the governor wouldn't budge. So, the next round of elections, those people are in deep shit because I'm a conservative voter, but I'm not going to vote for anybody who put this on the backs of Montanans, because we have a lot of poor people in this state who can't afford this. And then we have a lot of people like me at close to retirement, and I can't afford this. So you're into this a little bit more than what I am, because you're a consultant and you kind of look into this stuff, but it's crazy.
It is. It's absolutely insane. The overall average property tax bill for Montanans went up 48.5%. So obviously in some counties that was more, other counties it was less. It was based on property assessments, property appraisals, those types of things. And so but you're absolutely right. Montana is a very overall poor state. Almost 53 cents of every dollar we have is government funding. So wow. There's been jokes for a lot of years that Montana is a welfare state. So what are we going to do to not be a welfare state? And that kind of goes back to the foundations of Montana. If you know anything about Montana history, we were a boom bust economy. We were built on copper kings and cattle, timber, oil, those types of things. And so Montana's went through these cycles where natural resource development was prominent. It's kind of went by the wayside. And so we go through these boom bust economy cycles, which is pretty common for many Western states. They have similar things. Montana just went through this really kind of interesting hiccup, though, during the pandemic. And I think that's kind of where a lot of people are confused, or a lot of people are like, how did we get here? And so I think that's where a lot of really in-depth analysis needs to look. And I think people need to be asking those questions about what's going on. So
tell people the latest thing on your end is, and if I say this wrong, anything I say wrong, please correct, because this is how I want people to also understand. When you have a conversation, you don't not ask something because you don't have all the facts. You ask the information to get the facts. So are you taking Broadwater County to court, or you're asking for a moratorium on development? You explain.
Right. Yep. So it's not at this point in time a court case yet. What we're doing is we're drafting a moratorium based on Montana Code Annotated and local subdivision regulations, which basically is saying until the county can come into kind of compliance with state law, we need to kind of slow down on development. And I know there's a lot of people out there who are going to be like, oh my gosh, that's attacking private property rights. And that's not what we're doing at all. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be enforcing the law that's already in place. And that's not currently happening. And one of the best examples is Broadwater County, because we're not looking at all of those components that go into these subdivisions or these developments. And what people don't understand is that if we don't look at the laws that are in place right now, this can strongly affect life or safety of the residents in Broadwater County. And it also gets into almost a constitutional rights violation of people who live in Montana and Montana citizens. So that is kind of the overall kind of 5-second pie in the sky about what we're doing. I was asked by a group of people in Broadwater County to write this because this is kind of my thing, my background and my history of writing that kind of stuff. So it's been really interesting to talk to people who are new to our county, but also people who have been here for generations about what do they want our county to look like going forward. And I think this is just kind of a snapshot of other counties, other jurisdictions, cities, and communities across the country who've seen the same kind of growth during COVID. Yeah,
because I think it's going on all over the country. I mean, and development here, I know the nasty word is any kind of planning, but what you're saying and what I've heard from some people in the industry is there are many homes here in Broadwater County that aren't even paying an assessment on a tax. And
that is what we're learning is that there are several. I've heard anywhere from dozens of homes to hundreds of homes, depending on who you talk to. And that's what we're asking the commissioners and we're asking our government to do, is to before we get really super carried away about doing other things, let's look at what we've got going on right now. Let's do some long-term planning. Let's do some long-term forecasting as to what this is going to look like. And let's not use what happened in 2019, 2020, 2021 as the basis for panic. We need to do some long-term and investigative work before we get down that road. I think a lot of times we're being kind of sold this bill of goods going, oh my gosh, populations are exploding and it's going to stay that way. But when you look at the actual statistical data, that's actually not the case. And so do I think we need to do long-term planning? Absolutely. Do I think our county is going to look much different in 20 years than it does now? Absolutely. But we need to make sure that we're doing that planning, that growth, that development in an appropriate and legal manner. And that's not happening right now.
So what about water? And I mean, because water is a huge concern, especially down by Three Forks, where is that the reason that rest area sits there and it's not even open? There's a brand new rest area right off the freeway on I-90. Nobody talks about it. It's like but it's all built. And then it says closed. And I've been talking to one of the local newspaper guys here. And then you and I had a conversation. So tell people, what's the deal? What's the story?
Well, and it's interesting because if you ask our commissioners, they say, well, we don't have the information, call and ask the state. You call the state says, well, you need to talk to your local commissioners about that. And when I finally made like the third back and forth phone call, I said, okay, let me just throw a theory out here for you. And I said, is it because we don't have water? And the person who answered the phone goes, well, And so in my world, that basically says, if I was wrong, you would tell me no, right? And if I was right, you would tell me yes, but you're not going to tell me yes because you don't want that to be a publicly known fact. But what we do know for a fact is when we've had these planning meetings, we've got people or citizens who live in that southern part of the county who said, hey, we don't have consistent water. We can't get water at our new place, and we can't get insurance because we can't get water, which affects fire rates on your fire insurance and your homeowner's insurance. So I don't think to conjecture that water being the issue with this rest area is inappropriate. I mean, the facts are kind of there. You just kind of follow the trail.
Well, and why can't we ask that question? I mean, that's what's, and it's the same thing with our taxes. I mean, I sat down with the county representative and my wife and I and listened to the conversation about why, because our question was, why are we paying in our area 53% for education, which I feel like I should do my part for education, but I mean, that's a couple grand. And I got other people with kids in schools that aren't paying that. And it's like, for that whole thing, here's my beef. It's like, yes, all these people came into your area because they wanted to get out of their blue state or whatever it was they were looking to get away from. They came here, and your property values, did go up. But doesn't mean it doesn't mean you have to take the whole chunk in 1 year and cause people to do, like not me, but other folks to probably lose their homes. I mean, you didn't have to do it this way, and the legislature could have met and come up with a better plan or a different plan that wasn't going to be such a hardship on people. But we hear the governor boasts about the budget being balanced, and yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Dancer, and others. But you don't hear, then they give us a $650, like and charge you $5,000 on the other side. It's like, what are they thinking? I mean, it's not about the people. That could be spread out over a few years to bring those property rates up. Why did they have to do it all at one time?
Right. And that's what the Supreme Court basically ruled on last week, is that,
I saw that.
Many counties had said, no, we're going to only levy at 77.9 mils. And the Supreme Court says, no, we are going to side with the state and say you're going to levy those full 95 mils. So now we've got 37 counties who sent out their property tax bills. They're going to have to go back to their people, their citizens, and say, we screwed up. We didn't levy your mills appropriately. So now you have an additional tax bill.
Was it 37 or I thought it was just a few?
It was 37 that had initially jumped on it that says they weren't going to do a full tax collection.
What is your concern with the involvement or the lack of involvement of people in this process? Because I mean, you're out there and you get hated. I'm out here, I get hated. Tim, the newspaper guy, writes an article, he gets hated. What is it that we the people are missing, do you think?
I think I think it's really easy to hate. Every story needs a villain. So, hey, I'm okay with being the Wicked Witch of the West in this story. That's fine. But at the end of the day, when people come up to me and say, gosh, my property taxes went from $1,500 to $6,500 and I don't understand why. And I'm like, I can explain that to you why it did. And these are the people that you elected. These people that made these decisions are the people that you circled the little, you filled in the little oval for, and you need to be asking them. You need to be holding them accountable. And you get the pushback going, oh, but that's not how it works. The thing that I've learned the most out of all this entire process is that people are almost scared to question government. And that I don't know where that came from. I mean, I'm sure that we've seen a lot of things on TV. We've seen a lot of things happen in different areas across the country of, people challenging government. But when you look at what's going on, especially even in our county, this isn't a revolutionary, type thing. We're saying, hey, why are we doing this? Why are we allowing this to happen in our community? And where is this money going? That's the other thing is that where are we putting these funds that we're collecting? Do we really need them? We keep hearing, I know every meeting that you and I've both been to is the budget's really tight. The budget's really tight. And my question is, okay,
where the hell is my $5,000 going?
Correct.
If it's so tight, why you just increased mine and many other people's by 53%. If I got a 53% raise in my business, I would not be complaining that I didn't have the money to operate my budget on.
Right. And I think, and that's exactly it, is that where are these funds going? And I keep hearing, well, it's going to take a couple of years for them to get on the tax rolls. But here's the interesting thing. If you look at the development and you look at the growth, so Broadwater County, and these numbers come straight from the Montana Department of Commerce's website. So in 2020, Broadwater County saw 9.5% growth from the previous year, which was this county, Broadwater County grows at about 2.5% every year. So we saw 9.5% growth from 2019 to 2020. So we get into 2021, we're at about 7.7%. We get into 22, we're at about 5.9%. 2023's estimates are at 4.1, and then 2024 we're back to kind of that 2.3, 2.5 kind of growth. Okay, so we had this growth, this boom bust kind of
because of COVID and people like me who left their state and came somewhere better.
Yep, the Montana theory is COVID and Costner is what caused that growth and development. So that's the inside joke with the Montana kids is it's COVID and Costner. But anyway, so we had this growth and development. Well, now we're going, oh my gosh, we have all these people. We have issues with infrastructure. We have issues with services. We have issues with water. We're having issues with traffic and congestion and those types of things that many people have never seen before. And now we're going, oh no, we have these problems. Absolutely. And they're here to stay until we do some planning. And that's part of what we're trying to kind of do with this citizens initiative is saying, okay, we know that we've seen this growth in the last amount of years. Let's pump the brakes on crazy development and let's hold people accountable, because we know in small communities, a lot of times it's just been, hey, Bob, go out and do what you're going to do. We got this. We can't use that. We can't utilize that form of government anymore. We're not going to be able to vote Bob in to be our county commissioner, our mayor, or whatever, just because, he'll do us a favor when he's in there. Bob's going to have to follow the same rules and regulations that Rick and Audrey and everybody else is going to follow. We just can't have that anymore. And I get that that's a traditional, Western kind of thing. The handshake is still very, very important. But the reality is that handshake also has to take into account all of the rules and regulations and law that we've previously established. Montana, for example, is one of the few states that address water in our Constitution. It's really, it's an entire section in our Constitution, and it talks about the environment and natural resources and the right to free and clean water. And I always laugh and go, it's kind of ironic, because when we had the timber argument back in the late 80s, early 90s, and we said, oh, we can't develop and we can't utilize timber because, it affects the environment. That was the argument then. But now that we're on the flip side of that, we're just saying that doesn't matter. And so that's always interesting to me, because we're having the same fight, but in a different context. And especially when it comes to water, Montana has senior water rights in itself could be its own show for you, just because it's a very complicated thing. And people in the West, as we know, wire and water settled the West. So when we talk about that kind of stuff, there are very strong opinions. There are very strong laws. There's a water court in Montana. There's some very definitive things in Montana that make water rights incredibly complex, and they're incredibly important. And so when we get into these kind of things where we're talking about non-exempt wells for development, or we're getting into things about we don't really need to worry about what we may or may not be doing with Canyon Ferry water and stuff like that, those are all really important factors that we need to bring these people to the table and be having these conversations on. It's not just as simple as stamping approved on a subdivision application. And I am all about private property rights. I do not want to confuse anyone about that. But all I'm saying is that if I was going to build a highway or I was going to log a piece of property, I would have to follow the rules and regulations to do that. And all I'm saying is that we need to be doing the same type of thing for development.
Well, now we keep hearing, like I keep hearing from county officials here, Broadwater County is the most growing county, and this kind of stuff, and so I feel like the state of Montana kind of took advantage of the situation. This is my opinion. I have no facts, but you watch. So it goes up to 9%, and now we're dipping back down. So here, while we're in the middle, it's like, okay, raise those property values, because then those values are going to go back down. But I'm already paying my taxes. You know what I mean? It's like, I feel like, I get people on here. I'm a 7th generation Montanan, and you don't get to come here and say anything. And it's like a guy wrote on my page, when the 7th generation Montanan starts paying my $5,000 tax bill, then you can shut me up. But until then, I am going to have an opinion, and I'm going to voice my concerns, because I'm paying into the process like you are, my share. So what is that with that? Do you feel like that too? Like that, took advantage of all these people moving in? It's like,
I think this is kind of a twofold situation. I think number one, Montana panicked because I honestly don't believe that we ever thought we would see that level of growth and development in Montana that quickly. And then I also think that there's a whole lot of people in a whole lot of positions, and not just government, whether it be agencies or private sector or whatever, who are kind of going out selling a whole lot of snake oil to the citizens of Montana, going,
like, what's the snake oil? What's the snake? What's it?
I think we're having, the conversation is, oh my God, we're the fastest growing county. But are we? Because the numbers don't justify that. When you look at counties like Gallatin, Missoula, Yellowstone County, their growth and development was way larger. Per capita, they were larger. And so when I hear that, I go, is that per capita? Like how are we the fastest growing county? Look at Flathead County. So Kalispell up by Glacier Park, that county's been growing exponentially for years, long before COVID and Costner and kind of that whole kind of thing. Gallatin County, another one of those counties. My husband went to college in Bozeman, and we joke about the fact that we remember when Belgrade was a Class B school, and you actually packed a lunch to go from Bozeman to Belgrade. It wasn't just this kind of continuous city. So when we look at that, we go, oh my gosh, we're growing so fast. I fully and completely understand and am very empathetic to traditional Montana families and the fact that we've been here for generations, and we do need to preserve that heritage. We do need to preserve those agricultural lands. Absolutely 100% in agreement with that. So when people start going, well, I've been here for 7 generations, where have you been for 7 generations? Have you lived in downtown Bozeman? Are you an agriculturalist whose property is being sold, or you have to subdivide it to pay the property tax bill? What is your story? Because let's be honest, we can all go all the way back to Manifest Destiny and, Thomas Jefferson and Lewis and Clark and go, how many of us are really, truly, honestly traditional Montanans? And I mean, that's a whole nother argument for a different day, but so let's have that conversation. America's a melting pot, right? Like right. We're all immigrants for the most part, unless you come from a Native American background. So I think this whole idea that we're going to protect Montana and when people aren't going to move here, and if we talk bad to them, you're all going to pack up and leave. That's not the case. However, on the flip side of that, I do think that people who moved to Montana also got sold a bill of goods in the fact of we have low property taxes, we have all of these freedoms. And this is my biggest fear, just looking at political trends throughout the years, is that we went through a really definitive stage in kind of the early to mid 2000s with Montana where it was not cool to be conservative. It was really tough to be a conservative. And we had a significant amount of non-conservative control over our state for a number of years. And my biggest fear is that we had a whole lot of people move to Montana during this COVID Costner pandemic kind of thing. And they're like, oh, we're going to move here for freedom. But then on the same hand, they were kind of sold a bill of goods too, because it was like, oh, property's cheap and you're going to have this and you're going to have this and you're going to have this. But we really can't fulfill that promise that we made them either.
Right. Okay, hold your thought because I want to talk to you about other things. Just a sec. Let me run a couple of commercials here real quick.
The smile is huge. I mean, just having a smile, and when you interact with people, it really makes people much more confident, much more comfortable, and restoring those smiles. And the same thing with facial trauma. When you have patients who've been through facial trauma and reconstructing the face, it really makes a tremendous impact on people emotionally, and that's always appealed to me. I really like taking care of the whole person.
So, what's the next step for you then with this moratorium?
So what we're going to do is we're going to get this drafted. A few people that are really interested in kind of spearheading this are going to look that over. We're going to do some editing. There's conversations about turning it into a petition. There's conversations about making it just a request to the commissioners. We'll see where it goes from there. But it's really going to be in the hands of the citizens of Broadwater County to kind of drive this sort of change or this sort of request from the commissioners. What is
your one of the things I've noticed, and I noticed this in Oregon as a news guy, is the lack of involvement by people to pay attention to what's going on. There's a ton of people here and in Oregon, I think all over the country, who just want, I just don't want to just leave it alone. And then they only get mad when they get their property tax bill and it's gone up, and they realize, well, the reason 53% and $2,000 of my bills going is because you built a new school, which maybe you needed a new school, maybe you didn't. Who knows? I wasn't here, and I understand that's my bill. But when you vote for things, there's a cost that goes with that, and I think people just say it's almost like buyer beware. You're gonna, if you don't look into what you're doing, you could be buying something you didn't really plan on, and it's going to come back to haunt you.
Absolutely. And I think voter education, constituent education is so important. And I think that we as a society do a very poor job of that. We don't really educate people about what the truthness is to what they're buying, whether what they're voting for, or even who they're voting for. I think that is probably one of the biggest issues that we have just overall across the country is people don't know what they're doing. And it's not their fault. We've made it, the system, the government system has made it so difficult for a person to go in and say, hey, I'm Rick, and I would like to know how many students we have in our school and what did that look like 10 years ago and how did that grow? And it's really difficult for people to ask those questions because they don't know where to get that information, number one. Number two, they don't know how to ask for it. And number three is if you picked up the phone and called certain places, they'd be like, I'm not going to give you that information. You need to do a FOIA, or you need to do this, or you fill out this form, or come on down to the office. And we're all so busy with life. We have kids to raise. We have businesses to run. We have aging parents to take care of. We have all of these other things. You're just like, okay, it must not be that important. I'm just going to go on with my day. And so I think that one of the biggest things that we need is we need more transparency in our government systems and systems that we are paying for. To be able to get those answers. It shouldn't be that difficult. If you have a question, you should be able to pick up the phone and ask that question. It should not take, 7 pieces of paper to get a question answered.
Right. I mean, I've left a message with the county commissioners. They were very good about getting back to me. I left a message with the superintendent of the schools, never did get a call back. It was on a totally different topic. But I think people run into that a lot, and it's hard enough to keep my credit card when, I'm sorry, you've got a debt, the amount of time, or insurance, you go to the doctor and then having to fight them because you didn't go for this and you got charged for that. I think when it comes down to some of this stuff, we've abdicated our responsibility and become apathetic. And to me, apathy is the most dangerous thing, because government officials use apathy as a blanket to quiet us down, and then they go ahead and do what they think is best for us. But if you don't even know what we think, and we're not making that known, I'm not just blaming government officials, because I think we do a poor job of telling them what we want. But it's like, when I don't know, it is so frustrating. And this is not new. This is not just Montana. I saw this in Oregon all the time, is one voice, one side, the loudest, squeakiest wheel always got the grease. And And then the other people were busy working and, like you said, taking care of their kids and things, and didn't have time to hang out with this, which is why it's so important what Tim's doing with the Broadwater County News, is writing these people so that they do have to be accountable and answer those questions. Because I don't think people here kind of understand. I could get my mother used to say, my tit in a ringer. She's a farm girl. I could get myself in some trouble with this, but that's the job of a news person, is to ask the questions that the community wants to have answered. And you may not always like the way they ask the questions, but you sure do want that person writing and going to those meetings and standing there and listening. And I would hope that our local officials would be much more open to answering those questions than what I've heard that they are, because that's the link right there to the community. So if you're not supportive of hard questions, it's so funny, Audrey, because I just listened to Jordan Peterson this morning talking about this very thing about classrooms and when he was working with people, that how people just don't want to look stupid. And it's like, it's okay. I think what's worse than looking stupid is being ignorant, and not even propose, or being maybe having a lack of courage to say, this just doesn't seem right, and I want better answers. And then if you go, like my wife and I did, and we got the answers, I understand a little better what was going on, but I still think it's wrong. And I don't have to change my mind. I just need to educate myself. But it seems like we're afraid to do that.
Yeah, when we're little and we're learning how life works and we're teenagers and we make those mistakes, we stay out past curfew, or we run our truck down on E. There's life lessons to be learned with that, correct? And
Right.
So when we look at these kinds of things and we go, oh my gosh, my property tax bill is now $5,000 or $6,000. What mistake did I make to get there? Is it moving to Montana? We all love Montana. We're not going to argue that. But did I not pay attention to what was going on in my legislature? Did I not write my congressman? Did I not actively get involved in that kind of stuff? And I think that's what it is that I don't think it's any one person to blame. I think it's just kind of a societal norm that we don't want to question those things, and we don't want to ask those questions because it's scary and it's dangerous. And I will say, we are really lucky in Montana because we see our commissioners on the street. We see them at football games. We see them at community events. So we can ask those questions. We're very lucky in Montana. We have a citizen legislature. So any Montana citizen can go out and they can lobby and they can do their own hard work during the legislative session. And that's great. Like, we have better access. If you've spent any time in Washington, D.C., you know how hard it is to be able to testify in a congressional hearing. You have to get the little embossed invitation and they have to vet you. And you just don't go walking in there past the red ropes unless, you have the cred or the whatever to do that. So we're lucky in Montana that we don't have those kinds of obstacles. But we still have that obstacle of ignorance of how do we do that? And I think part of that does fall on those of us that have that knowledge to share it with other people, get them involved. Yep. But one of the things I like to tell people when they come to me and go, my property taxes is this high, is my first question is, so are you going to run for office? Oh no. Are you gonna go lobby the legislature and say, hey, I'm a 6th generation Montanan and I have to sell off X amount of acres to be able to pay my property tax bill? Well, I don't have time to do that. And so if you don't make the time, they're going to make the time to make sure you don't have the time. Right. And so that's going to affect it. We look at, I have a sophomore in high school. My son's 16 and he can't wait to get out of Montana because it's just not enough for him. And I go, why is our biggest export in Montana? It's not timber. It's not oil. It's not cattle. It's our children. Why are our kids leaving Montana in droves? Economic issues, not, being able to afford a house. Like, what does that look like? And so how do we keep those kids that we're educating in Montana for all those money? How do we keep them in Montana? Most of them go away and they come back. They're like me. They went off somewhere else and we came home and we chose to raise our families here. But is that opportunity going to exist for my kids or my grandkids? Probably not. That's the reality.
When you bring that up, I'm mad at myself because I remember that when the announcement came out that the Democrats were asking the Republicans to go take a day and look at this property tax thing. And have a special session and do something. And I did nothing. That was my moment when I could have called my representatives and said, I don't care if you're a Republican or whatever you are, get your ass in that special session and figure out how you're going to fix this. And for me, part of it is too, because I'm new to the state and I came here to assimilate, but I'm realizing assimilation and apathy, I can't just shut up. and it may not make people happy. And I may be the part of the problem. I've been told that too. It's people like you that are part of the problem. Okay. But now I'm here and I want to be part of a solution. And, I think it's what I still see really, what I love about Montana is I still see these people, like I'll be walking downtown and I'll have older ladies usually will walk up and they'll look around, they go, keep pushing them. And I that to me, Mr. Seventh Generation Montanan who writes me nasty notes, that's not Montana. Montana is that little old lady who looks around and sees bullshit, sees some people trying to cry it out, call it out, and comes up and doesn't want to make a scene, but will whisper in your ear, you keep pushing them. That's a Montanan to me. You know what I mean? That's an old Oregonian too. Rugged, independent people, who understand what the truth is. And, but the problem with rugged individualists is we all think we're right.
I fall in that same category as you, is that, I took a break from politics. I had my kids and I'm like, I'm going to raise my kids and I'm just going to let the professionals handle the political field. And it was interesting. My turning point, and I have no problem sharing this with anyone, is that my husband and our children said, well, two of my kids, my daughter, who's the oldest, she grew up in the Capitol. Like, she could probably give a better Capitol tour than, the people in Helena who they hired to do that. But she, my oldest one kind of graduated out of that. And so my younger ones just didn't, they hadn't been there, and they're like, hey, we've never been to the Capitol. So I go bebopping up to the Capitol, and I said, I was kind of incognito mom with the baseball cap and, the leggings. And I was like, oh, and this is this building, and this is this building. And a legislator who I've known for a long period of time was in one of the committee rooms, and he opens the door because we were looking in there, and he goes, come on in, kids. And he looks at me and he says, so, are you going to get back into the game, or are you just going to let Montana go by the wayside? And I'm like, I'm taking a break. I'm raising my kids. I'm PTAing. I'm football mom. I'm dance. I'm doing all these kinds of things. And it was interesting because on my way home, I was sitting there and I was going, he's not wrong. Like, you have to stay engaged. I have to be able to PTA football games, run my own business, do my job, and I still have to be engaged in my community. Because at the end of the day, if we don't all do that, we're not going to have communities to fight for. We're not going to have seventh generation people in Montana going forward because our kids can't afford to come home. Our kids can't afford to stay here. We don't have that. So you can't be apathetic anymore, and I'm just as guilty as the next person.
Well, to me too, and I have nothing to base this on except for experience, is if you don't plan growth in Broadwater County, growth will plan you.
Correct.
So you can, I don't want this to turn into, I want it to be the way it always was. Nothing is the way it always was. My life isn't the way it always was. My parents aren't here anymore. Christmas is never what it always was. Nothing is like that. But if you want to have a say in how that growth happens, you had better get your ass in that game, or it's going to come when that development goes in out there, those multi-million-dollar homes, there will be people coming in. And if you don't have it set up, they'll set it up, and then you'll be sorry. It happened in a little beach town where my parents have a house for 50 years. One family came in with a lot of money, built a brew pub, 2 condos, and now it has a day spa, and our little house is sitting here with all this around it, and the cute little town of Pacific City. Now all the urban people come out and it's so wonderful. It's like, no, I liked it when the ladies at the grocery store had black teeth. It was a lot more fun to shop there. So if you don't get involved, somebody else will, and it might not be at your best interest because your voice isn't, for me, Audrey, like the whole reason I do everything, and I've always done everything I've done, is I believe everybody has a voice and they should be able to use it, whether I agree with them or not. Because that's what this community, that's what our country was founded on. That's community. That's why COVID scared the shit out of me. And we moved because they were taking away our freedoms to speak. I came to Montana. Yeah, I got some haters, but you know what? I still can speak. You guys still let me talk, and you may not like it, but I still do it. And when that goes away, you're in deep crap. I mean,
Oh,
really.
absolutely. I mean, I look at people, agriculture is so important. Agriculture is Montana's number one industry, and we're talking about growth and development. How are we going to keep feeding our society? How are we going to keep feeding the people in our country if we don't have protected agricultural land, if we don't
Yep.
have those kinds of things? How are we going to build houses if we can't cut trees? I mean, that's been an argument I've been having for 20, almost 30 years now. So those are all things. But on the same hand, I want to also make sure that it's not just about, protecting those agricultural lands and all that. My concern is, how are we going to have the roads to be able to get you law enforcement or get you EMS services, because we don't have those people available, because we just don't have the population that's doing that anymore. What about water? Like, let's address the water issue. We need to do a water study. We need to look at what, and let's look at what the water rights are. Let's look at all of these. We do environmental impact statements every time we want to cut a tree. Why are we not doing environmental impact statements on growth and development?
And here's the other thing that I think that people in Townsend should look at, and is Canyon Ferry. That is one big economic driver, and everybody's going to be wanting your water. And you watch, other cities need water, and they're going to be coming a begging, and you better figure out what you're going to do about that before it happens, and utilize the asset that you have. I could be really get into myself in a lot of trouble. Make a nice place to eat down on the waterfront. I mean, we have this beautiful waterfront, and there's not a way for people to use it. Think about that when you're planning for the future and what's going to happen. You've got that asset. That's a huge asset. It's like gold,
And I was talking, we were talking about the northern lights the other night. I live in the northern part of the county, so we don't have a lot of the light pollution. And I said, one of the things that I joke about is I'm really lucky. I got to see, I see the northern lights from my house, and I don't have the light pollution. And people are like, oh my gosh, you take these amazing pictures of the northern lights. I want to be able, when my grandkids come along, to be able to take them out and say, see, stand on Nana's deck, and you can see the northern lights over Canyon Ferry. It's beautiful. It's one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen in my life. I want my grandkids to be able to see that kind of stuff. But if we don't address growth and development, if we don't address what that looks like, we're not going to have those things. We're not going to have, places to go recreating. We're not going to have that, because we're going to have these hodgepodges of things, or we're going to have people who are moving here. And this is my biggest fear, is that we're going to have people moving here who buy these homes or develop these homes, and they don't have water. And then what do we do? Like, we have these big, huge, elaborate homes that are developed and grown, and they don't have water. And what does that do? There's
a commercial on the radio, and at first, time I heard it, I kind of laughed. But I've lived on a well, for 40 years. We had it back when in Oregon. We lived out in the country too. But it says, when you build a house, you need water. Well, in Oregon, most people are on city water. A lot of people. And so it's like that's. I remember when the power would go out, and I'd go to work, and I'd go to the gym and take a shower. So people go, why the power went out? Why do you not have water? Well, see, a pump works on electricity. And so I don't have eWeb or the big power company still feeding me my water. It's all done by that. But I think that people don't understand that, if you've got Three Forks, if you got that whole area, and you're approving all these houses, and you haven't done a feasibility study and I don't know this for a fact. But do they know how much water's there? How many people can it hold up? And now you got all that development. Murdoch's is going in supposedly down there. The brewery. How much water can that area really give to do that? And then come up to Winston. How much water do they have? That new development out on the whatever that's called, I can't remember, out by
Spokane. Spokane Hills has got, we got that out there. But yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's why these feasibility studies, that's why these water studies, that's why partnering with these organizations that have this type of information or can conduct these types of assessments and these types of surveys to really give us good information is so, we talk about putting the cart ahead of the horse. I understand that everybody wants to move here. It's beautiful. And like I said, there's a reason why I live here now too. But I also don't want a bunch of people to move here and not have water and not have access to the basic needs that they have to be able to survive. And so we need to kind of, this, and we're not going to affect the growth and development. I think people are like, oh my gosh, moratorium is such a scary thing. That moratorium, or that concept of doing a moratorium, is for protection of the people. It's not a private property rights grab. This is for protection of the people, because here's my other concern. And I'm not a lawyer, but if I'm selling you a piece of property and I'm like, oh, this is beautiful and it's great, and it doesn't have water on it, where do those liabilities go? And we've seen there's multiple cases where people have gotten into trouble with real estate and land transactions and all that kind of stuff. Like, this is about protecting people. Or, we're looking at, climate change, whatever pick your fancy about those kinds of things. But one of the things that we're looking at an El Nino cycle. And this is the firefighter side of me. El Nino means hotter and drier. Well, if we're not having snowpack in the mountains, we're not refilling those aquifers. We're not refilling, those underground things. We're going to have a hotter, drier year. So if everybody's watering, how many wells can that sustain? Where's our water going to come from? We're going to have irrigation issues. We're going to have that type of stuff. And then all you need is a fire and you're off to the races and you've got a huge situation.
Well, but a lot of people, we didn't know this. Well, we knew when we came in. My wife is a researcher, but you're a buyer beware state too. Once you, like Oregon and other places, you buy a house, if it's a year down the road or something, you can go back. In Montana, it's like once you sign the papers, it's done, right? I mean,
right. But again, that's just a single flick of a pen of a legislative action, and that all changes. So you think about that. So you're correct. Montana is a buyer beware state. But again, a legislative action, a governor's signature, and we're off to, and then we're in that position. So those are all things. And that's what I'm saying is that we're talking about growth and development and sharing of ideas. People are coming here. Montana is becoming more of a melting pot. You're not the first person that's thought of that,
Right.
and we're probably not the last. So if you think about it, we'll be going into another legislative cycle next year. Next year at this time, we'll have a new legislative body. What's to stop somebody from saying, nope, we're not going to be a buyer beware state. We're going to go and follow what Oregon does or what Idaho does or what anybody else does. And then you have a flick of a pen, and then you've opened up this whole other realm of litigation. And so
no, I'm sorry. I could talk to you for like days. So here, let me bring up two other things that I want to talk about while I have them on my head. Oh God, one of them just disappeared. I look at this more, the moratorium word to me is like the word pause. Taking a pause and saying, okay, wait. Let's hold off and maybe set a timeline. Let's take a year to do this. My question is, are the county commissioners and other elected officials going to be going, whoa, wait, that's money coming in, development brings in more tax dollars. We don't want to,
Yeah. And I don't have the answer to that. That's a really good question for our elected officials. But my argument would be this: if we take a pause and we do things correctly, and we make sure that these houses are on the tax rolls, and we make sure that they have water, and we're protecting the environment with sewer systems or whatever, septic tanks, whatever that looks like, and we're doing that correctly, then people are going to want to come here. They're going to want to develop responsibly. We're going to attract the kind of people that we need to build our community, to build our state. We don't want people here who don't care about resources and water and what our state is built off of. Like, that would be my pushback for anybody who wants to move here is, if you want to come here, I am well, like, we are a melting pot. Come on, it is what it is. But we also need people who recognize that water is the lifeblood of any community. We also need to understand that, if you're building your houses on unfit soil, we got some issues. We need to put that moratorium and that pause on, just for, like you said, it's not a private property rights issue. We're not trying to grab private property rights. We're trying to make sure that the citizens of Montana are protected, and all of their rights are protected under the Constitution, under all of these other things that Montanans, whether you're a new Montanan or a 7th or 8th generation Montanan, your rights are being protected. And that is really important.
What I said, every time we go home back to Oregon, because this is home now, but every time we go back to Oregon, I see all the garbage, even in rural Oregon, just trash on the side of the roads. And somebody says, well, don't they have that in Montana? And I said, no, you know what I think? Because they call this the last best place, and it really is. And I think the reason I say to my friends, if you throw something out your window in Montana, the guy behind you will shoot you and he will kill you. And you won't have any there. That's not going to court. This is like, don't do that to Montana. I don't want to ever see that leave Montana. And I think for those of us like my wife and myself that come here, that's why we're here. I like that attitude in Montana where this is our state, but I think my encouragement would be to people, then get involved, because here's my warning. I saw what happened when Oregon got bombarded with people from the southern part of the West Coast, and it changed everything. And, and I've had people say, when you come here, don't bring your politics. Well, I'm going to bring my politics because it's part of my life. But fortunately, I think a lot of people that end up coming here, they tend to be more concerned about the things you and I are concerned about. And, I'm more concerned about my water rights than my pronouns. And I don't give a shit about pronouns, but I sure care a lot about the environment and the place I live and the people that I live around. That makes me very happy. So, Audrey, so last thing for you. So when do you file? When will when will people see the next action on this?
So we're hoping to have kind of the rough draft kind of done before the first of the year, and kind of get a plan together of whether or not we're going to do it as a petition or we're going to do it as just an ask of the commissioners. But this is one of those things that definitely there's a group of people who are part of this. It's obvious. It's not just myself. There's a group of people, like I said, that are working on this, and it's going to be publicized in the local papers. There'll be some Facebook stuff on it. So really strongly encourage people to get involved. If people have questions, by all means, don't hesitate to reach out to me. If I don't know the answer, I can find you a person who does. But yeah, I think the thing about this is we just want to get this done. We want to start having this conversation about what do we want Broadwater County to look like going forward, and what do we need to do to make that happen, and what is the safest and the best way to protect everyone going forward.
Okay, so when you get that written up, we'll, like right after the first of the year, let's have you back on and we'll explain it in verbatim, like what it is. So take the time, not like a news story, like, oh yes, and here's it, we'll just take the time to go through it with people so they can really see what that is. Okay.
Absolutely. I would love to.
Audrey, thank you so much for doing this. That was awesome. That made me feel it made me feel like I was doing my job,
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. We'll talk to you later.
Talk to you later.
Bye-bye. All right, there you go. So that's the way you do it. You get ahead of the game. You don't let the game run you. You go in and you set up the rules and the setup of what you're going to be doing. And again, don't think of this as a moratorium. Think of it as a pause, because I was just reading something in my Streams in the Desert the other day here. In every great musical piece, there's a pause. In every great speech, there's a pause. In the middle of the storm, there's a calm. In the middle of a wheel, everything on the outside of the wheel spinning, the middle of the wheel stays still. A pause is just a way to figure out where you are. And maybe it's time for Montana to just figure out where it is so it can determine where it wants to go. Don't be afraid of the pause. Okay? One more ad here. A friend of mine, Dr. Michael Bratlin out of Eugene, he loves pauses. He loves freedom of speech, and he would love this conversation because it's just involvement. He's created something I use. He took the night guards that you use so you don't, crunch your teeth, put a little plastic wire thing on it, and it works for people. It's not a diagnosis, but it works for sleep apnea. Watch. Well, hello, everybody. Joining me is Dr. Michael Bratlin from Chris Dental Family Dentistry.
I made one of these appliances for myself just to see how to experience it, just so I knew what to tell my patients what it was, and Rick, just show everybody real quick what it looks like.
Yeah. So here's what it is, you guys. This is what it looks like, and you just.
So what it does is it moves the jaw forward, and there's different size bands, and so everybody starts out with the second longest band, and so it kind of moves the jaw forward. But now I've been doing it for 2 years now. It has changed my life. And it has changed a lot of people's life. FYI, these devices, they cost anywhere from $3,000 to $6,000 in a lot of dental offices. If you don't have insurance, I think it's about $1,200 to $1,400.
Well, I think it's awesome because I think there's a lot of people like you and me who don't qualify as sleep apnea, but we are snoring, grinding our teeth, and not sleeping well. And here's something it's pretty dang simple.
I couldn't live without it. And that's why I kind of reached out to you. I'm like, hey, we got to let people know because it is such a life changer.
Dr. Michael Bratlin, thank you for coming up with new inventive ways to stop us from grinding our teeth. And just might help you sleep a little bit better at the same time. All right, so for those of you in Oregon, you can take advantage of that. If you live in Montana, I'm not sure how we'd get the mold taken. Always a problem. I'm Rick Dancer. Share this on your page, especially if you're here in Montana, so that other Montanans can see this and understand what's going on, and be thankful. I mean, we live in a country where it's about you. It's about you and me. And those people work for us. So sometimes you have to not remind them, you just have to remind yourself. And you know what? Demand.